So let's get into the analysis of these two stories from Ray Bradbury. I'm going to start with the Veldt. And this story is really interesting to read in the context of modern day technology, considering that Ray Bradbury wrote it in 1950. And a lot of the things that exist in that story, which actually kind of resemble a lot of things in our world, those would have been wild futuristic things to imagine at that time. Now, I want to start with the characters, specifically the Hadley children, Peter and Wendy. And a lot of people have really strong reactions to these kids, and understandably so, especially given, what happens at the end of the story, but they're sort of almost bratty, entitled reaction to the parents wanting to turn off the house. That we have some social ideas that relate to that today. So this idea that these kids are so attached to their technology that they throw this, almost psychotic fit, that's something that people have reactions to, which is fair. But we want to look at this from a literary perspective. And one of the things to think about here is their names. Their names are Peter and Wendy. And that is a literary allusion to J.M. Barrie's novel, Peter Pan. Now, you may be familiar with the story of Peter Pan. And when we ask the question, now, why does that allusion matter? How does that relate to the Hadley children? The idea of, the Hadley children having this place where they can escape to, similar to Neverland, where they never have to grow up and they don't have to have parents, that's the obvious answer. But let's complicate that a little bit. So if you're not familiar with the details of the novel Peter Pan, the reason that Peter wants Wendy Darling and her brothers to join him in Neverland is because Wendy is reaching an age where she's sort of growing out of her adolescence. She's about to be a young adult, and she has a very sort of nurturing motherly role among her siblings. And Peter wants Wendy to come to Neverland so that she can be a mother figure to him and the Lost Boys, who don't have parents in Neverland. That's why he wants her to go. And she does. And they fly off to Neverland and they have all these adventures. Now, one night, Wendy is telling Peter and the Lost Boys a story. And that's a story about her parents and them coming home, and their parents are so glad to see them and welcome them with open arms. And Peter has sort of a breakdown about this. And we learn that when Peter first came to Neverland and tried to go back to his mother, that wasn't what happened. She didn't seem to miss him at all. As a matter of fact, Peter felt that she didn't love him. And so Peter is very resentful of that story. And when Wendy hears what happened to Peter, she panics and tries to get her and her brothers out of Neverland immediately. That's where they get captured by Captain Hook. So Peter is feeling, abandoned by his mother figure again. Now, while the whole climax with Captain Hook goes down, it's interesting to note that Smee, who is Captain Hook's right-hand man, offers to free Wendy if she'll be his mother. And then, eventually, they escape and they get back home. And at the end of the novel, there's this moment where, Peter is watching the Darling parents, the parents of Wendy and her brothers, from the window. And Mrs. Darling is feeling very inadequate. She's feeling like she's feeling like a failure because her children are gone. It's clear that she, loves her children very much, but, she's sort of helpless with what to do. And there's a line in the novel where the narrator says, "Some people like Peter, some people like Wendy, but I always liked Mrs. Darling the most." So in the novel Peter Pan, a huge theme is motherhood and the bond and love between mother and child, right? And this idea of how that affects, what you grow, if you grow up, or how you grow up, or what you grow up into. Now, in terms of the Veldt and how we make sense of that illusion in the story, I would turn you to one of the first descriptions we get of the house in the very opening pages. It says, "They walked down the hall of their soundproofed Happy Life home, which had cost them $30,000 installed. This house, which clothed and fed and rocked them to sleep and played and sang and was good to them." The house has sort of disrupted this bond between the parents and their kids. And we see this from Mrs. Hadley. She speaks about this in the story. She says, I feel like I don't belong here. The house is wife and mother now, and nursemaid. Can I compete with the African Veldt? Can I give a bath and scrub the children as efficiently or quickly as the automatic scrub bath can? I cannot, and it isn't just me, it's you. So Mrs. Hadley is having these sort of inadequate feelings because, and it's not that her children have gone anywhere. They just have this house that has sort of replaced her role in the nuclear family and that family dynamic. And a lot of people, at the end of the story, when, it's implied that the Hadley parents are killed and Peter and Wendy have no reaction, a lot of people sort of see that as a signal of their, evilness or how they have been corrupted. And, sure, absolutely. But it's not that these kids are devoid of emotion. It's not that these kids don't have feelings. They have strong feelings when the parents threaten to turn off the nursery. And you want to think about why that is. In every, sort of intent and purpose that matters, the house has become their parent figure. The house has become what cares for them, what nurtures them, what they're attached to. They're bonded to this house, but not their parents. So of course they don't react when their parents died, because they're not, they don't feel like they are their parents. Now, this at the time is related to, in psychology, the idea of attachment theory and the idea that your bond with your primary caregiver, typically a mother, is very influential in the way that your brain develops, which was going on at the time. And that's something that the story is definitely dealing with for sure. But we also want to look at the literary perspective of conflict. So one of the conventional conflicts that we have talked about is character versus nature. And one of the most natural parts of our development is the relationship between a child and their parents or their caregiver. And in this story, what Ray Bradbury has effectively done is he has replaced nature with technology. And so the children have developed this sort of, almost perverse natural attachment to technology in that in the way that it corresponds to literary conflict. Now, this is, of course, the crux of the whole story, the idea that technology has replaced a natural part of what their family is, a natural part of what it means for them to be human. And another literary element that you can turn to for that is the lions. So these kids have this virtual reality nursery where they can literally experience anything that they can imagine. They could be flying on dragons. They could be, off to Neverland. They could be doing all of these sort of magical, unbelievable things. But what they've become obsessed with is the equivalent of National Geographic on repeat. They just watch these lions, and this nature scene. Well, why? Why are they obsessed with that? First of all, this goes back to the idea of, the conflict with nature. They have experienced, all of these sort of escapist ideas, but what they are drawn to at the end of the day is nature, is something natural and real and primal and instinctual, like a parent bond. By the same token, lions in literature are a conventional symbol for power and authority. Now, this of course begs the question, who has the power and authority in this story? Is it the parents? Certainly not. Is it the children? Maybe. Or is it the house? Has the house taken the authority in? Is the house the authority figure here? And this is where, the literary element of character can get a little complicated, which, you want to consider this. Is the house a character? Now, if you'll think back, a character doesn't have to be human. All a character has to do is to be able to participate in the action, think, make decisions, etc. Is the house sentient? Is the house, a character in this story? And arguably, it certainly is, in the way that these things happen. But consider this. At the end of the story, when the Hadley parents are meeting their fate with the lions, we know that the house can unlock the door. But it doesn't. You also have all of these sort of warnings to the parents throughout this story. He finds this wallet, there's this heat, they're hearing these screams. Where are those coming from? Well, you could say that the children are imagining it, or this is something that the house is warning them of. Which, and the answers to those questions are complicated. They're going to depend on the reader. But that's what Bradbury is doing in the story, is replacing nature with technology and leaving us to wonder at what point technology becomes the authority, not just in a literal sense, but in a sense of control. Now, the second story, There Will Come Soft Rains, this idea of the house as a character is much less sort of debatable, because that's the only thing that is a character in the story, except, the dog. There's no humans in the story. The house is the character that we focus on. It's the protagonist, etc. Now, this story is interesting to read after the Veldt, because this seems like it could be the exact same world that the Hadley family lived in, maybe some years down the road, but it really seems to be a similar sort of future that Bradbury has imagined here in There Will Come Soft Rains. Now, what's the major difference here? Well, there are no humans left. We learn in the story that what is implied to be an atomic bomb, nuclear weapon, has taken out this city that has a faint radioactive glow. And you want to note how it is described what the family was doing when this happened. So it's describing the outside of the house, and it says, running down the charred west side where the house had been burned, evenly free of its white paint. The entire west face of the house was black, save for 5 places. Here the silhouette and paint of a man mowing the lawn. Here, as in a photograph, a woman bent to pick flowers. Still farther over, their images burned on wood in one titanic instant. A small boy, hands flung in the air. Higher up, the image of a thrown ball, and opposite him a girl, hands raised to catch a ball which never came down. The 5 spots of paint, the man, the woman, the children, the ball, remained. The rest was a thin charcoal layer. So this family is out mowing lawn, picking flowers, kids playing catch in the yard when this happens. And it's tragic. But compare that to the Hadleys. You don't have these sort of corrupt, morally perverse family dynamics in this family. This family, by all accounts, is doing what you would expect the all-American standard Americana family to be doing at this time. And yet, they are still victims of technology created by man, and that they are wiped out by this nuclear weapon. So the character that we're left with is the house. And the house doesn't seem to have any emotional care, that the family is gone. It's, as the dog is wandering around hysterically trying to find them, it just sort of said, and it realized what the house had always known, that they're gone. And the house also, mentioned shutting the windows and keeping out birds and foxes and things like that. It mentions, it's making pancakes and the starving dog can't get to them because it keeps it out. And the house feels like it's doing a good job, right? Now compare that to what a human would do in that scenario. As readers of this story, you probably hear the role of the dog in that story and, feel sort of heartbroken for him. And the house, on the other hand, the dog dies and it cleans it up and it goes along. So one of the main characteristics of the house is that it is devoid of any sort of natural empathy. It doesn't have empathy for the natural, for any living being in the story. And it is simply doing what it has been programmed to do, whether or not the family is alive, whether or not that comes at the cost of other living beings. It doesn't have any sort of natural empathy. And this is something that goes back to that fear of technology that dystopia often explores. Now, what happens to the house, of course, is that the tree falls and it catches on fire. Now, this goes back to that conflict of character versus nature. Although technology has taken out the family and the technology of the house has survived, what ultimately takes out the technology is nature, is a tree and a fire. And if that house wasn't still cooking, it wouldn't have started a fire. But I want to talk a little bit about what we can do with the conventional symbolism there. So the house goes down in a fire, and fire has conventional symbolism in a number of different ways, particularly in religious ways. But fire can be symbolic of destruction, sort of raising an environment. It can also be symbolic of purification, or sort of freeing somebody, be symbolic of hell and sin and things like that. And you can read all of those conventional meanings into this fire. The nature has been sort of purified by the elimination of this technology that corrupted, the natural order. The house, though, has, fallen victim to its own sins, perhaps, by the fire taking it out. And we have this sense of destruction that takes place from it. But the fact that it is a natural element and a natural thing that causes it, that takes out this house, is where the thematic meaning of this story comes from. Ultimately, what these stories are looking at is the idea of man versus nature, and how we add technology into that mix. And that's something to think about as you're drawing your own thematic conclusions for each of these stories from Ray Bradbury.